Dr. SARINA Volari is a licensed clinical psychologist. She completed her undergraduate studies at Columbia University, where she researched the intersection of Eastern spiritual practices with Western cultural dynamics. In graduate school at the Wright Institute, she completed a doctoral dissertation on the subject of life between life hypnotherapy. Clinically, Dr. Volari has trained at Harvard Medical School and Stanford Medicine. She now specializes in evidence-based therapy to treat trauma and behavioral dysregulation and coaching to address procrastination, avoidance, and academic career-related growth. She works well with the spiritually inclined and curious, bridging the gap between rational science and mysticism.
It is really an honor to be here today. I just feel so much gratitude to even be an attendee, to be able to hear from Benjamin, from Peter, to be in the presence of everyone who's here. Thank you so much. And Carol, thank you so much for bringing us all together. And I also see that Diana Pack is here. This is great. This is actually a great introduction to how I ended up doing this research. So I'm currently a clinical psychologist. To become one, I went to graduate school, and part of my graduate school requirement was to write a dissertation. And I knew that I wanted to study something that was meaningful for me, and I had always been curious about this world of people who are experiencing something beyond, um, an experience that is not limited to this lifetime, to this incarnation, and I wanted to study it. Um, and I'll break my talk today into 3 parts. I'll start by explaining the study that I did, the dissertation that I did. I'll then move into an experiential exercise where I'm going to ask all of you to participate to help me fill in the blanks of my data. And then we can close out with a Q&A. And I just wanted to check with you, Carol, what time do you want me to wrap up in East Coast time? Oh, you're on mute.
So if we can wrap up with everything, including the Q&A by 4:45.
Perfect. We might even finish earlier, in which case we can have an extra break. Okay, great. So I wanted to talk about the study, and the study started with a question, which was, what happens to somebody after they have a spiritual experience involving the afterlife, or a past life, or the place between lives? And as I was doing some review of what research already exists, I found that there was a lot of information about near-death experiences and psychedelics, people who had had spiritual experiences, but in ways that were hard to replicate in a scientific study for a dissertation. Near-death experience for obvious reasons. Those are hopefully random. We're not inducing a near-death experience for anyone. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't really send participants to go have a near-death experience. There were other ways that people could have spiritual experiences, like, for example, psychedelics, but not everyone who takes psychedelics will have a spiritual experience, or even if they do, not every psychedelic spiritual experience will involve contact with the soul. Some do, but not all. So I knew that that was also a little bit tough to study. Um, in my research, I found out that there are people who are inducing near-death experiences, for example, through like visual aid goggles, where you can watch yourself die, watch yourself float out of your body, but then that's kind of fed to you. That's not organic. Um, There are examples of very intense Buddhist monk meditators who meditate themselves into that near-death awareness state, but again, takes years of practice. I got really lucky in that um, There actually is a standardized protocol for hypnotically experiencing afterlife consciousness, and that is life between lives hypnotherapy as regulated and taught by the Michael Newton Institute. And I thought, hey, this is kind of perfect. There are a bunch of people in this world who are certified facilitators in a standardized protocol that help people experience afterlife consciousness. And that means that we can study what happens to people, where people are at before they try this experience and where they are after. And this was a really important question for me to answer because I found generally that a lot of people who are seeking spiritual experience are often doing so from some sort of place of pain, deep curiosity, something's not working right in their current life, and it generates curiosity about wanting to pursue a spiritual experience, perhaps one in which you can get more answers. But I wasn't actually sure what was happening, and I could see all sorts of different scenarios of outcomes. For example, it could be that someone could undergo this kind of experience, have an awareness all of a sudden of a past life, have awareness of how they chose this current life from that place between lives, and maybe they come back and they start sharing it with their friends and family who don't really understand what they went through, and maybe it could even be alienating. On the other hand, maybe it could be really awe-inspiring. Maybe you have contact with an experience of deep peace, bliss, oneness, and you come out and you're profoundly changed for the better. I just wanted to know, on average, what was happening to people when they underwent this experience. In the here and now for this incarnation, what does it mean for you? What are some outcomes you can expect if you choose to undergo this kind of experience? And because I was studying to become a clinical psychologist, it made sense to me to study this experience in terms, or like the outcomes in terms of mental health. Basically, what happens to depression symptoms? What happens to anxiety symptoms? And we'll talk more about the measures that I had chose. But I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about the Michael Newton Institute and how I came to this work. So, so we can see here on the slide, we have a picture of an individual. This is Michael Newton. And I thought I'd share a little bit about him and his work and how he ended up founding the protocol for Life Between Lives hypnotherapy. So, as I understand it, Michael Newton was a clinical hypnotist, and clinical hypnosis can actually be really symptom based and actually a little dry sometimes. Like, I think when we think of hypnosis, we think of this really rich soul exploration. There's actually a version of it where, for example, you can come in with irritable bowel syndrome symptoms, and clinical hypnosis can actually be really helpful at having you reduce some of those symptoms. You can come in with shoulder pain, you can come in with extreme fear of physical pain surrounding birth, and clinical hypnosis can actually be a tool that can really help you navigate very much symptoms of the current day, of your current experience, of your current life where it's at right now. And this is what Michael Newton was doing. The thing, though, and as many of you might be aware of or have experienced, is that when you're in a hypnotic state, even if it's for something like addressing and loosening shoulder pain, what can happen sometimes is people can start reporting inexplicable things. Things that when you put the pieces together, you start to realize, oh, I think that they went to somewhere else. I think they might have been talking about being a different person. And with some time comes a realization of, oh, this person is actually talking about a past life experience or a between lives experience. Here's an example of something that Michael Newton faced. He was trying to help an individual with some sort of symptom that they were coming in with, and all of a sudden the person said, "Wait a second, I'm seeing something here," and he gives more details. It comes about that this person is describing life as a soldier, and Michael Newton is not really sure what's going on, but he's taking notes. And one of the things that the person starts reporting, he's like, I see a badge. And Michael says, well, what's on the badge? And the person says, well, here's the badge number. And Michael writes it down and goes, okay, not sure what that was about. But then afterwards, after the session, does some research and realizes, hey, this soldier with this badge number that my client was talking about, there are historical records that match with a person who actually existed with this badge number. And it reminds me a lot of what Benjamin was talking about how you can kind of get this information in the lived reincarnation experience, and you can actually go out into the world and fact check it. So he fact checks it, and he's like, okay, well, I'm not really sure what to do about this information, but okay, interesting. A little while later, is seeing someone who is coming in for shoulder pain, but she's also, in addition to the shoulder pain, a bit depressed. She's a bit sad. Michael says, well, I don't know what we can do about that, but we can address the shoulder pain. And so he's working with this individual, and all of a sudden she slips into a between life consciousness state. And she says, hold on, I'm seeing my friends. And this is a woman who was actually very lonely in her current incarnation. And Michael starts asking questions like, "Well, what's going on? Who are these friends?" And she is explaining, I felt so lonely my entire life, but all my friends are here. They've been here this whole time, and they didn't come out. They didn't come down with me. I'm here without them, but I know that they're with me. And after that experience, she left, and even though she came in for shoulder pain, what she left with was a sense of deep connection and a solve for her loneliness. So, over time, Michael Newton started to realize that this was an experience that could actually be replicated and induced. Essentially, a hypnotist could guide someone to have these spiritual experiences. And in general, the protocol is essentially having someone inducing a hypnotic state, having someone experience a past life consciousness within that state, then having that person die from that state, and then staying with them as they die until they reach that life between lives state. And once there, people can do any exploration that they might be pulled to do naturally, or if they have some questions, they can come about and start answering them. So, for example, people have found out in this life between lives hypnotic state why they chose their current life. They can start to get answers about questions they may have had, about pains that they have. And it tended to be a very healing experience. Themes of love, forgiveness, peace were really dominant. And because it was a structured process, he was able to actually write out a script for other hypnotists to follow so that it wasn't just him that was able to create this experience, but now multiple people who are trained and certified in the LBL protocol can actually help induce this for others. Michael Newton has since passed, and there is now the Michael Newton Institute that carries on his legacy. And Diana Peck, who's actually on this call, is the current executive director of the Newton Institute. So I knew when I was in graduate school that I was curious and wanted to research this. So I contacted Diana and I said, hey, I'm curious if I can do a study around this because I want to know what's happening to people who undergo this kind of experience. And again, there were some questions. I had reason to believe from what Michael had written in his books and what others had reported in the literature that, yeah, this is probably a really powerful and great thing. It's probably something that could really help people with their mental health symptoms in the modern day. But at the same time, there were questions. What if, for example, someone discovered a really disturbing or painful past life and they were left with confusion, pain, maybe even guilt about something that they didn't have control over in this current reincarnation? And I just wasn't sure. So I wanted to get some data. Um, Diana was really incredible and helped me with this study. And here's how I ended up carrying it out. So, the Michael Newton Institute has a series of people who are certified in life between lives hypnotherapy that they've trained. What I did was introduce myself to all of the trained hypnotherapists. And I said, hi, I'm SARINA. I'm doing a study and I need your help. What I'm asking for is your willingness to give a survey to people who come to you interested in trying Life Between Lives hypnotherapy. And I want you to give them the survey before you do any hypnotic regression with them. And if these people are willing to take the survey and they complete the protocol with you, then I'll reach out to those people a month afterwards to give them the same measures, and I'll compare the measures before and after for each person to see what changed. So 10 certified Life Between Lives hypnotherapists from North America, South America, and Europe agreed to support in this study, and that meant that they would repeatedly recruit participants. If someone came to them and said, "Hey, I'm interested um, in Life Between Lives hypnotherapy," the facilitator would then say, "Great, happy to schedule a session for you. And before then, are you interested in taking the survey?" So that happened repeatedly, and I got 73 participants, so people who are pursuing Life Between Lives hypnotherapy, to take the pre-Life Between Lives hypnotherapy survey. Now, from that sample of 73, 20% participants were disqualified from the post Life Between Lives survey, meaning I didn't follow up with them. The most common reason was that they didn't actually schedule the appointment, or if they went, they didn't experience, they weren't able to be induced into they weren't be able to be induced into a hypnotic state. And so, okay, some people were not able to have the experience either for scheduling or just because they couldn't drop into that hypnotic state and have that experience. And then there were also 22 people of these. So now we have 53 people who are eligible to take the follow-up survey, and 22 people just didn't. People's lives are busy. Who knows why someone won't take a follow-up survey, but it's also totally optional. It's within their right to not take it. What that left me with, though, was in the end, 31 participants who qualified for the study in that they had given me both their pre-Life Between Lives hypnotherapy measures, and at least 1 month after they completed the hypnotic protocol, they took the same measures again and they sent them my way. So the rest of what I'm going to talk about in the study here is data based off of these 31 people. So, first, a little bit about who these 31 people were. Majority were female, 68%. Many were highly educated. At least 48% of the participants had a graduate degree. Uh, Middle age was kind of the average age of seeking the experience. Average age was 46, although participants range from 28 to 76. Um, even though the facilitators were more broadly across the world, the participants were located themselves in Europe and USA, and it was likely an all-white sample. And that's just from who ended up coming through and giving me their data. Now, in terms of what I actually wanted to study, again, I was a clinical psychologist or becoming one, and so I wanted to study mental health measures. So what I did was I tracked depression by giving out the PHQ-9. I tracked anxiety, fear of death, resilience, psychological inflexibility, spirituality, presence of meaning in life, and search for meaning in life. And you'll see that in parentheses next to each construct, I just have the name of the measure I used. And part of the reason that I included measures um, was that it's quantitative. You can actually measure someone's depression on a scale of none, mild, moderate, severe with a number attached to it if you give out a measure. And I figured that we might want some actual numbers to compare people's experiences. And I'll just go through some of these constructs quickly. Depression, we tend to be culturally familiar with what that means. Same with anxiety, same with fear of death. Um, Resilience, ability to bounce back. Psychological inflexibility is one that I like to talk about a little bit. When I think of the word psychological inflexibility, what I think of is like if my husband wants Thai and I want pizza, how flexible am I to say, okay, let's do Thai? That's actually not what psychological inflexibility or flexibility stands for. What it actually means is how able you are to hold your emotions lightly without being afraid of them, how able you are to make choices in your life independent of what your emotions are telling you and more dependent on what your values are telling you. Um, and so the more psychologically flexible you are, the more able you are to have your emotions and not be afraid of them, the more able you are to act according to your values rather than your mood. Spirituality, how connected you feel to any higher power or any sense of connection beyond yourself. You can define that as God, but you don't have to. You can define it as the oneness or a sense of connectivity. Um, Presence of meaning in life and search for meaning in life are quite interesting. Presence of meaning in life is simply the awareness of, I know what I'm here to do. I know why I'm here. And that's usually correlated with a sense of peace, lower depression, lower anxiety. The search for meaning for life is often correlated actually with higher levels of depression and anxiety. And that is often because if someone is searching for meaning of life, there can tend to be a sense of angst. Like, I don't know what's going on. There's a confusion here. And so I made hypotheses based on what I had learned from books I was reading, from what's in the literature, that if someone were to undergo life between lives hypnotherapy, they might get better across all of these constructs. So that was my hypothesis. Their depression would go down, their anxiety would go down, their fear of death would go down, but that their resilience would go up, that their psychological inflexibility would go down, spirituality would go up, their presence of meaning in life would go up, and their search for meaning in life would go down because the theory was that the search would be high upon initiating life between lives hypnotherapy, but that 1 month after that experience, they will have gotten some answers that quiet the search and replace it more with presence. So let's talk about, let me see if I can actually make this a slideshow. Let's talk about what actually happened. What do people think? Does anyone want to unmute, make a guess?
Tim here says that they all got better.
Okay. Where's Tim? Tim, can you wave? Hi, Tim. Tim, I have, let's see if I can, oh, can I share my screen again? Okay. Let's see. Tim was right. People got meaningfully better across every single construct. Now, this was great news. This was actually really exciting to see. And for any numbers-minded people or stats-minded people out of there, it was statistically significant for each measure, meaning that it is not likely due to chance that among this sample, people were getting better across each construct. It was likely to do with something about what happened, what transpired in that month. Before taking the survey, having the experience, and then after taking the survey. Now, this is where I need your help as a group of experiencers because this wasn't a randomized controlled trial, which means I wasn't taking a group of random people and assigning some people to do life between lives hypnotherapy and other people to do a control group experience, for example, like a meditation group. And what that means is that we can observe that this change happened. We just can't say that these people wouldn't have gotten better wouldn't have gotten better over that month anyway if they were the kind of people to be seeking out this experience in the first place. However, I have a hunch that it is, of course, related to the fact that they underwent life between lives hypnotherapy. But here's the thing, a lot of experiences can happen after undergoing life between lives hypnotherapy. Some people can end up with a great sense of confusion and wanting to find answers. They may end up going to archival research to figure out, is this real? What's going on? Other people may be sharing their experiences with loved ones, getting more clarity as they talk more about what happened. Some people might be keeping it really private, but journaling about it. And I'm curious if maybe we can go measure by measure and start to get a guesses as to why each measure reflected for the better after life between lives hypnotherapy. Now I want to put a cautionary like some caution tape over this exercise, which is to say that why is actually really hard to answer from a scientific perspective. For example, if I'm in a good mood today, but I was in a bad mood yesterday, and someone asks me why, I might not actually know. I could take a guess. I might say, well, today no one pissed me off, and yesterday 5 people did. But it might have actually been that today I had breakfast and I wasn't hangry, and yesterday I didn't and I was hangry. And it just goes to show that we don't actually know why, which is why we kind of want a rich table of guesses. We want a variety of guesses because it's probably going to be a combination of multiple whys that reflects the true why. Um, and so now my hope is that we can do some thinking together. And I would like us to, and now we're going to get into the experiential piece. And actually, before I go into the experiential piece, I think I'm just going to close out and say some limitations about the study, because I think just, good ethics as a researcher, you want to make sure that people are aware this is not like, I'm not making any grand claims here, but first limitation I'm just going to say is that this is not a randomized control trial. So again, what I was talking about earlier, we can't prove cause and effect. We can't prove that life between lives hypnotherapy is the thing that helps people get better, but we can say there's a correlation. Another thing I'll say is that some participants were not hypnotizable, so I'm not actually sure what their experiences were like. This might not be something that's accessible to everyone at any given moment. The sample wasn't representative of the general population. It wasn't culturally diverse, and so we don't know if these results would apply to other people from other settings. Here's a big one. I actually can't prove that what participants experience in life between lives hypnotherapy is real. I actually leave that to people like Benjamin Okado, who's coming after me, to actually do that proof. They're the ones who are actually figuring out, hey, can we prove that these experiences, the ones like my past life experiences, are ones that are real? Can we prove that what I'm experiencing in the life between lives realm is something that I actually did experience? That this research can't prove. And another thing is that it's unknown how those without life between lives hypnotherapy aligning beliefs, so like atheists, people who don't believe in reincarnation, would respond to this intervention, because it's a self-selecting sample. The people who signed up for this study are people who were choosing to undergo this intervention in the first place. So those are the limitations of the study. But let's actually see if we can get some answers into, from this group about why a spiritual experience might actually improve your well-being and your mental health. And so this kind of comes down to the question of, how do we integrate spiritual experience? For example, you and I on Saturday, October 25th, can both undergo a life between lives hypnotherapy experience. We can both experience past lives. We can both experience the space between lives. But then the next day, I might continue my day as normal and pretend like nothing ever happened. You might really be thinking about this experience and trying to figure out, what does the fact that I had this experience, what does it mean for my life? And so there's this question here of, how do we integrate spiritual experience? How do we bring our past life knowledge, our between lives knowledge, and actually make it count in the here and now? And one thing that we can do is a very simple mindful awareness exercise of bringing positive experiences we've had spiritually into the present moment. And so I'm actually going to ask everyone in this group right now to think about a spiritual experience you've had. And I'm going to ask that you think about something that feels mildly pleasant or very pleasant, as opposed to something that was dark or scary, for the purpose of today's exercise, because I'm not seeing anyone individually, and so I don't want anyone to have an adverse experience in this group setting. So try to think about a spiritual experience that you've had that felt positive in some way, that you kind of want to bring more into your present day life. It can be a time where, for example, if I'm thinking about what Benjamin shared, it could be that experience with that deity. If I'm thinking about someone like my mom, who I don't think has ever had like a lived spiritual experience, but really likes to read about this kind of stuff. I might think for her, she might choose a time when she was reading a book by Dr. David Hawkins, one of her favorite authors, where she gets a lot of peace reading those books. So it doesn't matter what the experience was. It could be something from psychedelics, something from a hypnotic experience, from a past life, something that feels kind of good. And I want you to give me a thumbs up when you have that experience. Nice. I see people in Tiffany's room. I see thumbs up from the group. Okay, perfect. Great job identifying your experience. And so now what we're going to do is a little bit of a share. So if you are in a group setting in person, what I'd like you to do is find a partner, and you can spend, I'm going to give you a timed 2 minutes, 1 minute each, to share the experience that you identified. If you are alone right now, all good. What I'd like you to do is you can either type into the chat box or write on a piece of paper what you remember about the experience. So I'm going to give everyone who's in person a couple seconds, find a partner. Okay, great. We're paired up. If you need to be in a group of 3, that's totally fine. I am going to set a timer for 2 minutes, and I'd like you to decide the first person to go, and you have 1 minute to start sharing your experience. Again, if you don't have a partner in person, type into the chat if you'd like to share, or write down into a notebook if you want to keep it to yourself. 2 minutes on the timer. Start sharing. What did you identify? We're at that halfway mark, and so now is a good time to switch and have the other person share. Twenty seconds left. Great. We're at time, so I'll ask that you wrap up your conversations and bring your attention back to the group setting as a whole. In the chat, we have some really great contributions here. Kenneth says, experience of death in an earlier life and what followed in a holotropic breathwork session. We have from Jonna, being in the gentle presence of a magenta-skinned alien, and since then receiving photos and videos from him on my phone. We have from John, I'm an addict, long in recovery, and when my life turned around, when I was accepted defeat on my issue and my own powerlessness and reach out to the universe asking for help, immediately, though nothing had changed, everything seemed different. And yes, I felt an amazingly powerful, benevolent presence and inner warmth. Now I would like to invite, does anyone in the group want to unmute and verbally share anything that they've identified? Maybe we can get a couple people to share.
Hello.
Hi.
So I want to make sure the question was, you want us to share what we just shared with our partner?
Yeah, that'd be great.
My one of my very first experience in spirituality was I was a part of online meditation, and this lady who was facilitator has me and another lady online, and it was very new for me. I was just experiencing meditation, and I lay down on my bed because that time I couldn't sit down and meditate. I always had to lay down and be totally relaxed to do that. So I was in my bedroom, lay on bed, and as soon as the lady facilitator start with the first breath that I took in and out, I saw this being, a huge being beside my bed. It was a lady. She was from Asian descent. Uh, this and her feature was like a long black hair, a robe like a kimono, but it was loose on her body, and the color was peach. Very specific, distinctive feature. And the intention for meditation, I forgot to add, was opening our throat chakra. So as soon as I saw her, I didn't know what to say or how to react. I just remembered I need to greet whoever I see in my meditation. So I greeted her, and she had a beautiful smile, and she started putting her breath on my throat from out here. So like just like that. And in a second, I start hearing voice coming from my throat that I couldn't, it wasn't me making that. It was just coming from here, the noise, vibration, and then suddenly it switched to a sob, a very, very hard sobbing. I start crying, sobbing, and noise was coming out. And then she embraced me. Literally, I opened my eyes in my bedroom to make sure I'm not going crazy. And then I was in here and I was on the earth and I was in my bed. So I closed my eyes and I saw she embraced my body, hold me tight on her arms. And I called her mother. I don't know why that word came from. I called her mother, and she started give me compassion. As I was crying, she was just giving me compassionate energy. And at some point, the lady called me, keep calling Ruby, Ruby, are you back? Where are you? And I just heard my name. So I told her I need to go. I don't want to go, but I need to go. And I swear to God, she held me tighter, like you don't have to go. So I stayed a few more seconds, but I told her, this lady is getting worried for me and I have to. And I thanked her, and she loosed her body as the way she came, and I thanked her and she left. Was very positive experience. So do you have question?
Thank you so much for sharing. And your name's Ruby?
Yes.
Ruby,
Yes.
that was a really powerful share, and I really experienced that. I really appreciate that experience, and I almost felt it with you. And that actually brings us really nicely to the next part of this exercise. And so now, we can actually, I'm going to share my screen again. So we'll come out of gallery view. Oh, and I'm noticing there's more in the chat, which I really appreciate hearing about. So I'm going to use Ruby's example lightly for a moment, and I'm going to say that the next thing that we're going to do here, step 2, we're going to activate that spiritual experience. And one way to activate it is just to go into that memory and really feel it again. So for example, almost like exactly what Ruby was doing, really describing the details, going to the moment. And so if I'm Ruby in this stage of step 2, I might picture that feeling of the gentle blowing on the throat. I might experience the compassion, the release from the crying, maybe just noted like turning up the dial on that experience. But we all identified different individual experiences. So what we're all going to be activating will be unique to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my eyes, and I invite all of you to also close your eyes. And I want your mind to float to that experience that you identified. And I want you to start making the memory vivid in your mind. Notice what details come to you about the memory of this experience, and see if you can almost turn up the dial of vibrancy, of presence of the image. And I want you to really get into that experience, and I want you to think, what is it feeling right now? What is it feeling like right now for me to be in this memory? See if you can let the same experiences that you were having then happen now. Notice if you can let your body relax and feel the sensations then, now. Let yourself marinate in this experience that you've had. Let yourself focus on aspects of the experience that feel good. Notice your breath. See if you can let your breaths be big while you keep this memory active. Activating this memory, this experience. Now, in your mind's eye, I'd like you to give some gratitude to the experience itself for making itself known to you then and now. You can gently thank it. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. So now, my next question for us to share and talk about is, what was it like reconnecting to this experience? And it's a different question from the first experience, from the first question, because the first question was, well, what's the experience? Now the question is, what did it feel like just now to go there? What were the parts that stood out the most to you? What I'd like you to do is, if you are in a room with multiple people, you can find a new partner if that's possible, or if you're in a group of 3, you can keep the same group of 3. And I'm going to give us 2 minutes again to answer this question of, what was that experience just now like for you? And if you do not have a partner, or you're alone in the room, again, you're welcome to journal on your own or to type into the chat box for us to all share. I'm going to start my timer for 2 minutes. I want you to identify who your pair is. And who's speaking first? And we're going to start. First person share. Time. Thank you so much for sharing. So, we have one person in the chat who wrote, "It felt like settling into well-being." Thank you. And now, does anyone want to share publicly with the group what it was like for them? Maybe what they shared with their partner, what they experienced. Thank you.
I don't know if it's because of you, Serena, but I went back to the first past life that I remembered. I was talking about her earlier. Her name was Lily, and she said to me very, very clearly, oh, I have to back up. I was on an airplane flying to New York for a design job. I got out my legal pad. I was going to write, my to-do list, but the plane was taking off. And back then, in those days, I had fear of flying. So before I could write on my pad, I said, I need to meditate while the plane's taking off because I would get white knuckled. Meditate, meditate. So now we're up, we're in the air. I have the legal pad out. Instead of my to-do list, I write, what is there to fear of death, but rather fear not living? In this short little exercise, the message I got was how deeply connected I was to Lily. I have always been, all my life, to Lily. And then the extra message I got was, isn't it wonderful you can capture those deep truths in ordinary moments? So thank you. That was terrific.
Thank you so much, Carol. That was really beautiful.
And are there any others online that wanted to share?
I was sharing that in my Life Between Lives training, when I was the client, I experienced what I can only call the ultimate bliss, which was becoming one with Source. And I lost all sense of who I was and all of that. And I experienced the most incredible love. I just, like, I don't have words to describe that love that I experienced. And I just had tears. I was just overcome with tears and this incredible feeling of being one with all. So I just wanted to share that.
How incredible. Thank you so much. John, did I also see you raising your hand?
I kind of said what for me, it's not linear, spiritual growth. I had to go through a dark night of the soul first. And I wonder what people that do past life. I've bumped into some really nasty past lives where a lot of suffering and unresolved issues. So I'm not certain that with my clients it's necessarily linear, that it can be like down and then up. That's all.
I'm so glad that you said that. And because I also think it relieves some suffering when we're in a hard moment to think, but I've done all this work. This is wrong. It's wrong for me to be suffering. And instead, I think to have that perspective that you're sharing, John, can be so powerful where it's like, no, it's actually totally normal and okay. Really appreciate you bringing that in here. And now I see we have Tim. Hi, Tim.
He was in World War II on the beaches of Normandy, and he brought these soldiers that died on the beach, and they're kind of stuck in between and have not risen up. So I don't know how I do it, but we went through. I just went, if you forgive yourself for what you did and for what others did to you, and with help of, I have a white wolf, Athena, to send them up, we set them up, and it felt like fireworks going off, their souls going up from where they were stuck. And to this day, like, I get goosebumps right now thinking of it. And I've done this multiple times where he finds searches for these people. I guess that's his purpose on the other side, to send these souls up. And I just feel when I do that, it's emotional and it's humbling, but kind of like Samita, it's an incredible blissful thing after we do it multiple times. So that was you had to describe it as, it was like life changing for me. And that's, that was my experience on it. Incredible. That's all I could describe it.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Tim.
No worries.
So this also, I think, is a very nice segue into the next piece of this experiential, which actually goes back a bit to the research. So I'm going to share my screen again to the measures that I was studying in the pre-post survey for people who underwent life between lives hypnotherapy. And again, what the numbers showed was that everyone got better on every construct. But the piece that I'm not so sure about is how or why. And I'm hoping that we can actually answer that together through your experiences. So I'd like you to scan this list and notice if any one of these constructs or a couple are ones that stand out to you as something that you have maybe personally struggled with in your life. Or it may be that there's actually one that isn't listed here that feels accurate for you. And I'll read out the list: depression, anxiety, fear of death, resilience, psychological inflexibility, spirituality, or in this case, I guess, like feeling not spiritually connected, or resilient, not feeling resilient, or if you feel like you don't have presence of meaning in life, or you feel like your search is very difficult for you. I want you to notice, just scanning your own life, scanning your own sense right now, what do you really struggle with? What do you gravitate towards in terms of your struggle? And I'll say for myself, personally, for me, the ones that tend to stand out for me, I tend to be someone who can experience depression and anxiety, and I can also feel the pain of the search for meaning in life. Probably that's why I wrote a whole dissertation about it. But yeah, I want you to all just kind of come up with your own answers. Those are mine, personal to me, but just notice what comes up for you in terms of something you've struggled with. And give me a thumbs up if you're like, yeah, I kind of know what my flavor of pain is. Maybe you're like, all of it. Totally fine. But give me a thumbs up if you're like, yeah, I can identify a couple things, or it's like, yeah, that one's kind of me.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And so now what I'd like you to do is we're going to bridge where we've had difficulty with what is in our spiritual experience of the past. So I'm going to close my eyes again, and I invite you to join me in going back to that experience that you recalled, that spiritual experience that you recalled. And I want you to see what happens to the things that you've been struggling with. Maybe anxiety, depression, feeling spiritually disconnected, whatever it is. And notice what happens to that thing you've been struggling with when you bring it online with the spiritual experience you've had. I'm actually going to see if we can put these parts into conversation. I want you to imagine that you can let the experience you had talk to the pain point in your life. And let the pain point in your life talk back. Notice any dialogue and conversation between the two parts. The part of you that struggles the part of you that had the spiritual experience. Notice if they influence each other, if they impact each other. Just noticing. We'll take a deep breath together. In, out. You can open your eyes. And we'll do the same thing where if you're in a group setting and you can find a new partner, do so now. If you're on your own, you can type into the chat or get out pen and paper and write down, what was that experience like for you? If you're in a group of 3, that's totally fine. I'm going to give us 2 minutes to share. We'll start the timer now. First person can start sharing, or you can start typing in the chat. We're at time. Thank you so much for sharing. And now I'll read out some incredible things that we have in the chat. First, John mentioned a great point where, in terms of adding to the list, you can add in addiction, social uncomfortableness. I think I overheard someone who was speaking saying like, oh, like the BS of life.
That was us.
Yes, guys.
I didn't realize we weren't muted.
So I'm so glad that you weren't. And so it's like the BS of life could be one of the constructs that someone is struggling with. We have Jonna saying it felt like the issue was actually a coach, encouraging us to go into that higher spiritual frequency of peace and connection instead of spiraling down into fear. We have Carol saying, I received the message to everything there is a season, then responds and says reason to everything there is a reason. And then Jonna said, actually both work, which is true. And I'd love to know about anyone else's experiences that they want to share. What happened when you put those 2 pieces together, the thing you struggle with and a spiritual experience you've had?
I got the message because, I've struggled with issues of abandonment and not feeling loved. And the message I got from Source was, you were always a part of me. I'm always here for you. So it was beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, and we also, I coerced Holly.
Hi, I am Holly McGinnis. It actually, a little bit closer. Okay, so for me, it's actually similar to Smita, but I actually had more of a memory of a time when I was in pain and had the spiritual moment at the same time. And the feeling was really about like you are held, and just like a holding of whatever was like in a very loving, caressing, grounding, beautiful way.
I'm Ellen. This is not what I discussed with my partner. I just remembered another moment way early in my marriage when my husband was being sued, and I struggled with it and struggled and worried, and then finally one morning I woke up and I heard, it's only money. And then I dropped the whole thing. It just let it go.
Wow. Wow. No, I just absolutely loved that. Thank you so much because I think it really speaks to this piece here of how can spiritual experience help us with what we struggle with right now? And I think that that's just such a great example. It's like we struggle about money, we struggle about stress, and then sometimes the spiritual experience can be really direct, and it's a voice that was like, "It's only money," and it's great. You're like, that's a very clean, easy, you know, it matches the distress, it alleviates the distress that I'm in right now. And I also want to just make a note that it's we've been getting a lot of people sharing that they're having really positive experiences, maybe feeling what they've struggled with in life softening in the context of remembering a spiritual experience. And sometimes that might not happen. Like, for example, I'm someone who can actually be prone to frustration if I'm having a difficult experience and then I'm trying to contextualize it and be like, well, SARINA, you know, in the grand scheme of things, this doesn't matter. And then I can actually get frustrated that I can't believe that. And I just wanted to normalize that for anyone. So in case anyone did have a difficult experience with any of these exercises, it's okay and safe to have those difficulties in this moment. And I'll share my screen. This is kind of like the last step of integrating a spiritual experience at any point. You can apply the experiential experience. What are your takeaways and what do you want this spiritual experience to mean for you? And this is a place where we can include some agency, some will in terms of what we want the lesson to be. And sometimes the lesson is just so pure and given to us. Sometimes it's just so clear that the lesson is it's all about love. But let's say you actually had a confusing or complex spiritual experience. Let's say we picked a harder spiritual experience to integrate, one that maybe didn't feel so good. Um, let's say we pick a spiritual experience or a memory in which we were very confused or struggled or were in pain in a past life. We can ask ourselves, what do you want it to mean for you? And so now go to your experience that you identified at the start of this exercise. Just ask yourself the question, what do you want this experience to mean for you in your here and now in this reincarnation? And once again, you can type into the chat, you can journal, you can sit and think, or you can share. And so I'll have you, if you can find a new partner, amazing. If you can't find a new partner, feel free to circle back to one you've already worked with. I'll put a timer for 2 minutes. And if you have been someone who's been sharing more and you're across from someone who's sharing less, let the person who shared less speak first. But if it's been equal, just choose whoever. We're going to start the timer now, 2 minutes, and go. And now if anyone wants to do a group share, they can share what they want their experience to mean for them. I see Jonna in the group chat wrote, I see it as a big thumbs up from the universe.
They're loving these exercises and want to talk more.
You know what? I actually think I'll end a little bit earlier with the hope that you can keep chatting about this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have anything they want to share?
Oh, Carol, I think you're muted again. Oh, you know, okay.
Anybody online, would you like to share? I can't see you though. Let's see. Okay. I think everybody's still sharing.
That's so fair. 1 minute is not enough time to.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you know what? I'll give you more time to share, but I do want to make sure if you're not in a sharing location that you can engage maybe with some journaling or just closing your eyes and thinking.
Could you repeat that a little louder?
Yes, for anyone who is not able to share, maybe you're on your own right now listening and participating, you can talk more in the chat or you can close your eyes and just let yourself be with this experience, think about your takeaways, or you can journal. So before we move on to the Q&A, let's talk about why I had people do this exercise. Again, there were 3 parts to it. one, identify a spiritual experience. Two, make it active, think about it, bring it into the present. And then three, ask yourself, what are the takeaways from this experience for my here and now? And why did I have us do this? Because when I think about the fact that Life Between Lives hypnotherapy has clearly had such an incredible impact on people who have gone through it, one way to think about this is, well, it's not just the fact that you went through it, it's also how you integrate it and apply it to your current experience. And that is why we can always use this exercise at any point. You can do it when you're driving with your eyes open. You can do it, in a quiet moment. If you're eating dinner alone, you can have this exercise in conversation with another person. But the idea here is that if having a spiritual experience really is so impactful, why not make it live now, even if the experience was in the past? And that was my thinking. Now, it's separate from the research I did. The research actually didn't study whether people were making it live or making it present or salient in their life, but I wanted to bring it up. And oh, thank you so much, Jonah, for your kind words. So I now just wanted to open it up to a Q&A, and really my hope is that after the Q&A, if this sparked anything for you, you can keep talking about it with the people around you. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody, especially the people who facilitated, especially Carol, Smitha, but really each of you for sharing and for doing this exercise. I have a lot of gratitude because couldn't do it without you. So yeah,
Yeah.
any questions?
I have a question
Yeah.
for you. I know you were trying to keep your mindset as a researcher, as an academician, but I wondered how your research affected you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking about me. I think I was very intrigued by the research. Because I grew up, my I'm ethnically Indian, and my parents immigrated from India to the United States shortly after getting married in their early 20s. Um, and so they brought over some Hindu principles, but my mom was very much spiritually questing. My mom is someone for whom the search for meaning in life is quite high. And I guess I was just exposed to a lot of early spiritual um, books on tape. When she'd drop me off to school, she would play things like, I don't know if people are familiar with Esther and Jerry Hicks, or a spirit that they channel called Abraham. So I was listening to a lot of tapes about channeled spirits and what they were saying. Um, and I remember just this really deep craving for a connection to something beyond. You're in middle school, you have middle school drama. I remember just thinking, like, this sucks. There's got to be something more to this in life. And I remember feeling peace the closer that I got to that kind of information, that there was more out there than our suffering. There was a bigger purpose to it all. Um, I think I'm kind of a spiritually dense person in that I haven't experienced a past life. I haven't experienced the space between lives. And I think that's made me especially curious and in awe of people who can and do. Um, I actually attempted to try Life Between Lives hypnotherapy, but I ended up being in the category of people for whom it was just hard to get into that hypnotic state. Um, and so I think it's just kind of like my gratitude for people who can and do experience it, because when you have these experiences and you share them with the world with people who aren't having these experiences, you're opening the door for your profound spiritual wisdom for people who, for whatever reason, can't personally open that door at this time in their lives. And I wanted contact with that. And so that's what this study gave me. So in terms of what did it mean for me, it really reified my knowledge that even though I personally haven't had an experience like this, I can take the peace, the wisdom, the love from what these people have experienced and shared, and experience them on my own in my own way through what you've done. So my hope is that you may conceptualize yourselves as givers to the universe, that by having these experiences and sharing them, you're really doing profound healing work for a lot of people, not just yourselves. So that's my hope that that hopefully maybe some of you can take away, that you're helping far more people than you could probably ever even know or meet. Um, and yeah, I think it impacted me by giving me a great sense of peace just through the data. So yeah, thank you, Carol.
Oh, thank you. And it's why we do what we do. It seems like part of our purpose in being here. So thank you for that. Can I have it's just to get a refresher on the questions. Yeah, come on. Hi. I just need you to repeat those questions. It's identify the experience, and can you go through them again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
step one, identify a spiritual experience you've had. And for the purpose of today's exercise, I kind of guided people to pick a positive one. You could also do this experience with harder spiritual experiences you've had, maybe ones that feel a little bit confusing or painful. Um, because I'm also a clinical psychologist and I see people for therapy, I usually try to say, like, try to make sure that if you're doing that kind of work, you have a therapist or someone on board who can help you if you feel like you're getting stuck in the painful part. But also, if you feel like you're really well resourced spiritually, and you feel comfortable going to a harder spiritual experience, you're more than welcome to. But if you want kind of an easier, lighter, feel good experience, choose a spiritual experience that feels positive.
Okay.
Step two, activate it. That's when you close your eyes and you really try to remember, how did it feel? What was your experience like? And your goal here is to recreate what you were experiencing then when you were having that spiritual experience and bring it into this present moment here and now. What am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling an opening in the chest area? Am I feeling tingling in my hands? Really diving into, what is this experience like when I activate it?
Mhm.
And then step three is applying it and asking yourself, well, what are my takeaways? What do I want this experience to mean for me? And if you'd like, you can do that intermediate step of scanning for anything you're struggling with and then asking yourself, what would this experience say to my struggle?
What would the spiritual experience say to my struggle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that can be a way of also figuring out what your takeaway is in this moment.
5 o'clock. 4:40.
I want to say this is not like a proven integration method. This isn't something that I've studied. This is really just something that I came up with to help people engage with the research and the reason, like help people have an experience to understand why going through life between lives hypnotherapy might help with
Mhm.
the pains of life. But I just want to be clear, this wasn't part of the study. This
Right.
was just for us
Okay.
today. And I also want to say that because you can play around with how you integrate. If you want to include a different step, if you want to get rid of a step, you're totally welcome to. This was just meant to be like an exploratory experience for people to figure out, okay, I've had these spiritual experiences in the past. How do I bring them into the now?
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Something every day. While we're waiting on anyone else who has a question, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the other two speakers. What do you feel the purpose of life is all about?
So I'm also someone who follows the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. And I think that that kind of informs my belief that we're meant to transcend into higher states of consciousness. And the higher the state, the more love, peace, joy, and light there is. And so I think that our work here is meant to identify our suffering, be compassionate to our own suffering, to everyone else's suffering, and to continually connect to any kind of God or spirit or universal presence. And I think our goal here is to increase that connection however we can.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much again for sharing your research.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who, these are just anonymous people who participated. I de-identified the data, so it's just like there are 31 people who I just feel a ton of gratitude for, and I can't even express it. So I'll share it with you. If you've ever participated in a study, there's probably someone on the other end who's really grateful that you did. So thank you.
We need to do more studies. I'm just putting it out there to the universe. Thank you so much again.